Nathaniel Caldwell sat behind the imposing mahogany desk in his opulent office, the soft glow of the city skyline illuminating the vast room. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange hue that contrasted sharply with the cold decor of his surroundings. The walls were adorned with grand portraits of his ancestors, each gazing down with an air of authority and expectation. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled together as he reflected on the heavy weight of his family's legacy, a legacy marred by betrayal and loss. His gaze drifted to a collection of family photographs displayed prominently on the wall. There was a time when those smiling faces brought him comfort, a reminder of the unity his family once shared. But now they felt like ghosts haunting him, reminders of a past that had been shattered by the actions of Clara Thompson's family. It was a bitter irony. His own family's downfall had come at the hands of those he now sought to control. He could still hear the words of his father echoing in his mind. "Revenge is best served cold." It was a mantra that had guided him through years of ambition and ruthlessness. As he pondered his next move, he couldn't shake the sense of emptiness that had begun to plague him. Despite his wealth and power, he felt a gnawing void in his life. The lavish parties, the luxury cars, and the penthouse suite, all of it felt hollow. Perhaps it was the weight of his plan that pressed down on him more heavily than any financial burden. Marrying Clara would not only bring him a sense of justice, but would also serve as a reminder to her family of the price of betrayal. Yet even as he plotted, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. Would marrying her truly fill the emptiness, or would it only deepen his own sense of isolation? Meanwhile, Clara Thompson worked diligently in the expansive kitchen of the Caldwell mansion, her hands moving deftly as she prepared dinner for the family. The aroma of roasted vegetables filled the air, mingling with the sweet scent of freshly baked bread. Clara was a picture of quiet determination, her brow slightly furrowed as she focused on her tasks. She often thought of her younger brother, Tommy, who was relying on her to provide for their modest household. Every dollar she earned was a step toward a better life for him, a life free from the burdens that had shackled their family for years. Clara had always dreamed of escaping the confines of servitude. The mansion, with its marble floors and lavish decor, felt both like a cage and a beacon of hope. Every day she scrubbed floors and polished silverware, her dreams of a better life flickering like the candle flames that illuminated the dining room. She longed for a chance to give Tommy the future he deserved, one filled with opportunities and security. But as much as she dreamed, the reality of their situation weighed heavily on her heart. "Clara!" a voice called from the doorway, interrupting her thoughts. It was Mrs. Caldwell, Nathaniel's mother, a woman whose sharp demeanor often matched her luxurious attire. "You need to hurry. The dinner for Mr. Caldwell is almost ready, and I won't have you serving him cold food." Clara straightened, forcing a smile despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. "Of course, Mrs. Caldwell. I'll have it ready in just a moment," she replied, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. Mrs. Caldwell's piercing gaze lingered on her for a moment, as if assessing her worth. Clara felt the weight of that scrutiny, and it made her acutely aware of her position, a mere maid in a world of privilege. As she finished arranging the plates, Clara couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation from the adjacent living room. Nathaniel's voice, deep and commanding, sent a shiver down her spine. He was a man who commanded respect, not just because of his wealth, but also due to the aura of power that surrounded him. Clara had seen him only from a distance, but even then it was hard not to be captivated by his presence. He was a force of nature, and yet she knew better than to fantasize about him. She was merely the help, destined to remain in the shadows. That evening, as Clara served Nathaniel, she felt an unexpected surge of nerves. He was even more striking up close, his sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes holding a depth that made her heart race. For a moment their eyes locked, and she felt a jolt of electricity pass between them. It was quickly broken as he turned his attention back to the conversation with his business associates, his demeanor shifting back to that of the ruthless billionaire he had built his reputation on. "Clara, don't just stand there. Pour Mr. Caldwell some wine," Mrs. Caldwell snapped, pulling Clara from her reverie. She hurried to obey, but her mind was racing. What would it be like to truly know a man like Nathaniel? Would he be as cold as the rumors suggested, or was there more beneath the surface? Days passed, and Clara found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel was watching her, his gaze lingering a moment longer than it should. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. She wanted to believe there was more to him than the icy exterior he presented to the world, but she was also painfully aware of her place in his life. Then came the day that changed everything. Nathaniel approached Clara in the kitchen, a look of determination in his eyes. The clatter of cooking utensils faded away as he drew closer, and Clara felt her heart race. "Clara," he began, his voice low and intense. "I need to talk to you." Her breath caught in her throat. "Mr. Caldwell, is everything all right?" she asked, unsure of what to expect. This was the first time he had addressed her directly, and the gravity of the moment was not lost on her. "I have a proposal for you," he said, his expression unreadable. Clara's heart raced at the word proposal, and she couldn't help but wonder if he meant what she thought he did. Her mind spun with possibilities, both thrilling and terrifying. "What kind of proposal?" Clara asked cautiously, her voice trembling slightly. "I want to marry you," Nathaniel stated, his eyes locked onto hers. "This is your chance to escape your life of servitude. Think about it. A life of luxury, freedom. All you have to do is say yes." Clara was stunned into silence. The weight of his words settled heavily on her chest. Marry him. The idea was absurd, and yet a part of her longed for the escape he offered. But why would he want to marry her? Was it truly for love, or did he have ulterior motives? She felt the walls of her reality closing in around her, and the questions bubbled to the surface. "Why me?" she finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't you have options?" Nathaniel's expression hardened, and for a moment, his true intentions flickered in his eyes. "This isn't about options, Clara. It's about what I need. Trust me, this will benefit us both." Clara swallowed hard, her heart racing with uncertainty. The very idea of marrying him sent her mind into a frenzy. I need time to think," she stammered, feeling the weight of the decision before her. "Time is something we don't have," he replied, the urgency in his tone palpable. "I can make you happy, Clara, but only if you agree." And as he turned to leave, the finality of his words hung in the air, leaving Clara grappling with emotions she had never anticipated. The chance for a life she had only dreamed of lay before her, but at what cost? Little did she know Nathaniel's proposal was just the beginning of a complex web of love, revenge, and secrets that would soon unravel. As the wedding day drew closer, Clara Thompson found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Standing before the mirror in her small room within Nathaniel Caldwell's opulent mansion, she adjusted the delicate lace of her wedding dress, feeling both excitement and trepidation. The fabric was soft against her skin, but it felt heavy with the weight of her doubts. She had dreamed of this day as a little girl, imagining the fairy tale romance that would lead her to a happily ever after, yet the reality was far from her imaginings. Clara took a deep breath and turned away from the mirror, trying to shake off the unease that had been gnawing at her since Nathaniel proposed. His piercing blue eyes haunted her thoughts, filled with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. "Does he love me?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the silence of her room. "Or am I just a pawn in his game?" The question lingered in the air, unanswered. Meanwhile, Nathaniel was in his study preparing for the ceremony with a cold determination. He stood by the large mahogany desk, his fingers tapping rhythmically against its surface as he stared at the documents spread out before him. The grandeur of the mansion surrounded him, yet he felt a chilling emptiness that mirrored his inner turmoil. He could hear the sounds of preparations happening outside, the laughter of staff members, the clinking of glasses, and the distant hum of music. Yet all he could focus on was the fiery need for revenge that had consumed him since his family's disgrace. "Tomorrow, it will all be complete," he muttered to himself, his voice low and resolute. "Clara will be mine, and her family will pay for what they did." He thought back to the betrayal that had shattered his family years ago, the whispers of scandal that had tainted their name. The Caldwell legacy had been built on hard work and integrity, and it had all been tarnished by Clara's family. He could almost taste the satisfaction he would feel once he had made them suffer. As the evening approached, Clara ventured into the garden, seeking solace among the blooming flowers. The vibrant colors swirled around her, but she felt an eerie contrast to the beauty of her surroundings. She closed her eyes and inhaled the sweet scent of jasmine, hoping to calm her racing heart. Just then, her younger brother, Jamie, appeared, breaking her moment of solitude. "Clara, there you are," he exclaimed, his youthful face beaming with excitement. "The flowers are gorgeous. Do you think Nathaniel will like them?" Clara turned to him, forcing a smile. "I hope so, Jamie. It's a big day for all of us." "Are you nervous?" he asked, his blue eyes wide with curiosity. "A little," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's going to be okay. Nathaniel is, well, he's good to us." Jamie furrowed his brow, sensing the hesitation in her words. "Are you sure? I mean, I know he's rich and all, but I just don't want you to be unhappy." Clara knelt down to meet his gaze. "I'll be fine, Jamie. We'll have a better life, I promise." She embraced him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small frame against hers. "And we'll always have each other." As the wedding day dawned, Clara's family began to gather, their expressions a mix of concern and disbelief. They had tried to dissuade her from the union, warning her about the man she was marrying, but Clara had dismissed their fears. She was determined to believe in the promise of a bright future. As she stood at the altar, her heart raced, and she caught sight of her family seated in the front row. Their faces were tense, eyes filled with worry. "Clara," her mother whispered, leaning in closer, "are you sure about this? You don't have to go through with it." Clara shook her head, her voice steady. "I love him, Mom. I know he's not perfect, but he's given me a chance." Her mother exchanged glances with her father, who shook his head slightly. "This isn't just about you, Clara. It's about our family, too." "Please just trust me," Clara pleaded, her heart aching. She couldn't bear the thought of disappointing them or letting their fears dictate her happiness. As the ceremony commenced, Nathaniel stood at the altar, his expression inscrutable. The opulence of the setting was overwhelming, but it felt like a facade to him, a beautiful prison. He watched Clara as she approached, her face radiant yet tinged with uncertainty. At that moment, he felt a flicker of doubt, a momentary hesitation as he considered the depth of his feelings for her. But he quickly brushed it aside, focusing on the goal he had set. "I, Nathaniel, take you, Clara," he recited, his voice steady but devoid of warmth. The words felt foreign on his tongue, a hollow promise that echoed in the grand hall. "I, Clara, take you, Nathaniel," Clara responded, her heart racing as she spoke. The vows felt like an anchor, binding her to a man she was still learning to trust. As they exchanged rings, Clara's heart fluttered with hope, while Nathaniel's mind raced with thoughts of revenge. He could already envision the moment when he would confront her family, the look of shock in their eyes as they realized the depth of his plan. Once the ceremony concluded, Clara was swept into a whirlwind of congratulations and well wishes. "You're so lucky, Clara," one of the guests exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with envy. "Nathaniel is quite the catch." "Thank you," Clara replied, forcing a smile as she scanned the room for Nathaniel. She found him standing apart from the crowd, his expression unreadable. The moment their eyes met, a chill ran down her spine. Despite the joyous occasion, there was an undercurrent of tension between them that made her stomach churn. As the evening wore on, Clara's family continued to voice their concerns, whispers of doubt swirling around her. "He's not the man you think he is," her sister insisted, her brow furrowed with worry. "You need to be careful." "I know him better than you do," Clara insisted, her voice rising slightly. "He's been good to us." But deep down, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Nathaniel's icy demeanor contrasted sharply with the joy that was expected on such a day. She watched him from across the room, his posture rigid as he spoke with guests, a mask of charm plastered on his face. Yet she could see the flicker of darkness in his eyes, the hidden agenda that she had yet to uncover. As the last of the guests filtered out, Clara found herself alone with Nathaniel in the quiet aftermath of the celebration. The opulence of the mansion felt suffocating, the weight of their unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. "Nathaniel," Clara began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you really happy about this?" He turned to her, his expression hardening. "Of course I am. This is what we planned for, isn't it?" Tears pricked at Clara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I just want to know if you care about me, or if I'm just part of your plan." Nathaniel's gaze softened for a brief moment, but he quickly masked it with indifference. "You're my wife now, Clara. That should be enough." But for Clara, it wasn't enough. As she stood there, dressed in white and surrounded by luxury, she felt an overwhelming sense of foreboding. The wedding was a celebration, yet it felt more like a facade, a beautiful lie that would soon unravel. She could sense the storm brewing beneath the surface, and she couldn't help but wonder if she was stepping into a world of darkness that would consume them both. As the moon cast a soft glow over the opulent mansion, Nathaniel Caldwell sat silently on the edge of the grand bed, his thoughts swirling like a tempest in his mind. The lavish surroundings, the silk sheets, the crystal chandeliers, the roses that adorned every surface, felt more like a prison than a celebration of love. Clara Thompson, his newlywed bride, was in the adjoining room, nervously adjusting her wedding dress for the last time. He could hear the rustle of fabric, the soft sighs of her anticipation, but all he could feel was an overwhelming sense of dread. Clara emerged into the dimly lit bedroom, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. She hesitated at the threshold, trying to gauge Nathaniel's mood. "Nathaniel," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Can we talk? Just for a moment?" He turned his head towards her, his expression unreadable. "What is there to talk about, Clara? We're married now. Isn't that enough?" Clara stepped further into the room, the scent of her floral perfume filling the air. "I know it's a big change for both of us, but I thought maybe we could share this moment together. It's supposed to be special." Nathaniel looked away, his jaw clenched. The images of revenge against her family loomed large in his mind, overshadowing the warmth he knew he should feel. "Special," he echoed almost bitterly. "What is special about a marriage built on secrets and lies?" Clara's heart sank at his words. "It doesn't have to be like that," she implored, stepping closer to him. "We can make this work. Just give it a chance." He turned to face her, his eyes cold and distant. "You think I can easily forget the past? Your family—" "My family?" she interrupted, her voice rising in desperation. "What about your family? You're the one who proposed this arrangement. If anyone is to blame, it's you." A tense silence filled the room, broken only by Clara's shallow breaths. Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. "You don't understand," he said finally, his tone softer but still guarded. "There are things you don't know, things I can't tell you." "Then let me in, Nathaniel. Please," Clara pleaded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I want to understand you. I want to know why you're treating me like this." He took a deep breath, wrestling with his emotions. "It's complicated," he finally admitted. "I'm not the man you think I am. There are expectations, a legacy I have to uphold. Marrying you was supposed to be a solution, not a burden." Clara recoiled slightly, the realization hitting her like a cold wave. "A solution? You mean to your revenge?" Before Nathaniel could respond, Clara turned away, her heart aching with betrayal. She felt so foolish for believing she could change him, for trusting that he might genuinely care. Just then, her gaze landed on a leather envelope peeking out from beneath his pillow. Curiosity piqued, she walked over and picked it up. "What is this?" she asked, her voice shaking with anxiety as she opened it. Nathaniel's eyes widened in alarm. "Clara, don't—" But it was too late. Clara unfolded the letter, her heart racing as she read the contents. Words like lawsuit, damages, and family grievance leapt off the page, each one a dagger to her heart. She looked up at Nathaniel, her face pale, disbelief etched in every feature. "You're planning to sue my family?" He stammered, caught off guard by her sudden fury. It's not what you think. I didn't want you to find out this way. Then how did you want me to find out? By taking me to court in front of everyone, by dragging my family's name through the mud. Clara's voice rose as she felt the betrayal deepen. You're nothing but a monster, Nathaniel. Clara, listen. He tried to reach out, but she stepped back, her eyes ablaze with anger and hurt. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could control everything, that it wouldn't affect you. Control? She laughed bitterly, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. You think you can control everything, but you can't control how I feel. You can't control the pain you've caused. Nathaniel felt a pang of guilt stab at his conscience. I'm not proud of it, he admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. I thought I could marry you, play the part, and then I'd have the upper hand, but I didn't expect to feel this way about you. What way? Clara shot back, her heart racing. Do you mean like a pawn in your game? A means to an end? Because that's all I see right now. He stepped forward, desperation seeping into his voice. No, that's not it. I never intended for it to go this far. I thought I could bury the past and build something new with you. Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. You don't get to play the victim here, Nathaniel. You don't get to pretend that you're the one suffering when you're the one who chose to hurt me. Silence enveloped them, heavy and suffocating. Nathaniel felt his heart racing, torn between the anger he had held for Clara's family and the unexpected feelings that had begun to blossom for her. I didn't want this, he admitted finally, but I can't change who I am or what my family has suffered. Clara wiped her tears, her resolve hardening. Then maybe you should have thought about that before marrying me. I won't be a part of your revenge scheme. I deserve better. With that, she turned and stormed out of the bedroom, leaving Nathaniel standing alone, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt a mixture of regret and confusion wash over him. How had it come to this? The woman he had intended to use as a weapon against her family was now the one who had the power to hurt him. As the door closed behind her, Nathaniel sank onto the bed, burying his face in his hands. The weight of his actions pressed down on him like a dark cloud, and for the first time, he questioned the path he had chosen. Was revenge truly worth losing the one person who had begun to break through the ice encasing his heart? The realization left him more unsettled than ever, and the questions that lingered were far more complex than he had ever anticipated. Nathaniel Caldwell stared at the empty space where Clara had stood just moments before, her words echoing in his mind like a haunting melody. The confrontation had been explosive, and he felt the weight of guilt pressing down on his chest. He had always prided himself on his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage, yet now he found himself questioning the very foundation of his actions. Was revenge worth sacrificing the possibility of happiness? The thought gnawed at him, a persistent ache that he couldn't shake off. He moved to the grand window of his opulent bedroom, overlooking the sprawling estate that had once brought him pride. The moonlight cast a silvery glow over the manicured gardens, but Nathaniel saw none of it. All he could think about was Clara, the way her eyes had shimmered with hurt, the tremor in her voice as she had confronted him. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something that he had long buried under layers of ambition and resentment. Remorse. Why did I let it go so far? He murmured to himself, running a hand through his dark hair, frustration boiling beneath the surface. Clara had become more than just a pawn in his game. She had become a person with dreams, hopes, and a heart that now felt shattered because of him. The realization hit him harder than any business deal or betrayal he had faced over the years. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. And for what? To avenge a family grievance that felt increasingly irrelevant in light of his feelings for her. Meanwhile, in the small room she shared with her younger brother, Clara felt a sense of despair wash over her. She had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together, but now her heart felt like it was crumbling into pieces. She sank onto the edge of her bed, her hands trembling as she thought about Nathaniel. How could he have deceived her so thoroughly? The man she had hoped would be her partner had turned out to be her captor, wielding his power like a weapon against her family. "Clara, what's wrong?" her brother Jake asked, peeking in through the half-open door. His innocent eyes were filled with concern, and Clara felt a pang of guilt for allowing him to see her in such a state. "It's nothing, Jake. Just a tough day," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't lie to me," he insisted, stepping fully into the room and crossing his arms defiantly. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Is it about Nathaniel?" Clara sighed, the weight of her brother's concern heavy on her heart. "It is," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought he cared for me, Jake. I thought we could be happy together." "Happy? With him?" Jake scoffed, his youthful face contorting in disbelief. "You know what he did to Mom and Dad, right? All those years ago. He's not a good man, Clara." "I know," she said, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "But I wanted to believe that he could change, that maybe love could heal things between our families." "Love?" Jake shook his head vehemently. "He's just using you. You can't let him do this to you." Clara took a deep breath, the resolve hardening within her. "You're right. I won't let him use me. I need to stand up for myself, even if it means leaving him." "Good. You deserve better than this," Jake said, stepping forward to wrap his arms around her. Clara closed her eyes, allowing herself to lean into the comfort of her brother's embrace. She felt a flicker of strength reignite inside her, a reminder that she was not alone in this battle. As dawn broke the following day, Nathaniel found himself pacing the lavish halls of the mansion, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He had spent the night tossing and turning, the realization of his actions gnawing at him like a relentless predator. He had to find a way to make amends with Clara, to show her that he was not the monster she believed him to be. He stepped into the grand foyer, where sunlight streamed in through the tall windows, illuminating the marble floors. With a sudden burst of inspiration, he called for his assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Lydia. "Get me a list of the finest jewelry and gifts available in the city. I want to surprise Clara," he instructed, his tone firm. "Are you sure that's the best approach, Mr. Caldwell?" Lydia asked, raising an eyebrow. "Gifts won't erase what happened last night." "I need to show her that I care," Nathaniel insisted, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. "I can't lose her, Lydia. Not like this." Lydia studied him for a moment, her expression softening. "Very well, I'll arrange it, but I suggest you also consider having an honest conversation with her." Nathaniel nodded, though he felt a knot of apprehension in his stomach. What could he possibly say that would undo the hurt he had caused? As Lydia hurried off to fulfill his request, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation that awaited him. Later that day, Clara was in the kitchen preparing dinner for her brother when she heard a soft knock on the door. She opened it, surprised to find Nathaniel standing there, his hands filled with beautiful boxes tied with ribbons. The sight of him stirred a mix of emotions within her, anger, confusion, and a flicker of something she couldn't quite identify. "What are you doing here?" she asked, crossing her arms defensively. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice sincere but laced with nervousness. "I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I brought you something to show that I want to make things right." He held out the boxes, his eyes searching hers for any sign of acceptance. Clara's gaze flickered to the gifts, but she quickly steeled herself. "Gifts won't fix this, Nathaniel. You can't just buy my forgiveness." "I know that," he replied, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "But I want you to understand that I didn't mean to hurt you. I was blinded by my anger, by my desire for revenge. But when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for." Clara's heart raced at his words, but she held her ground. "And yet you were willing to use me as a pawn in your game. How can I trust you?" "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust," he confessed, desperation creeping into his tone. "I'll be honest with you, Clara. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could control everything, but I realize now that I was wrong." "Why should I believe you?" she challenged, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Because I'm standing here, willing to fight for you," Nathaniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "Please, just give me a chance to prove it." Clara hesitated, her heart torn between the desire to believe him and the caution that had been ingrained in her since childhood. As she looked into his eyes, she saw a flicker of vulnerability, a glimpse of the man beneath the layers of arrogance and ambition. But the scars of betrayal still loomed large, and she couldn't ignore them. Maybe. Maybe we need to talk first, she said finally, her voice softer but still firm. Before anything else. Of course, Nathaniel replied, relief flooding his features. Let's sit down and talk. I'm ready to be honest, Clara. No more lies. As they moved to the dining room, Clara felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for redemption, for understanding, and maybe even for love. Nathaniel Caldwell sat in his expansive office, the walls adorned with portraits of his ancestors, each a reminder of the legacy he was determined to uphold. His fingers drummed against the polished mahogany desk, a sign of the restless thoughts swirling in his mind. Despite the wealth and power at his fingertips, a gnawing emptiness consumed him, amplified by the chaotic emotions brought forth by his recent marriage to Clara Thompson. He had initially believed that marrying Clara would be a mere chess move in his plan of revenge against her family. After all, their history was riddled with betrayal, a narrative that had been woven into the very fabric of his existence. Yet, as he glanced out the window, watching the city lights flicker to life, he realized that the game had become infinitely more complicated. Clara was not just a pawn in his elaborate revenge scheme. She was a woman of strength and resilience, a woman who had unexpectedly captured his attention in ways he hadn't anticipated. Determined to learn more about Clara and her family, he began to dig into their past. Nathaniel's fingers flew across the keyboard as he navigated through online archives and public records. As the hours passed, he uncovered snippets of information about the Thompsons that surprised him. Clara's family had once enjoyed a comfortable life, filled with the trappings of wealth and prestige, but a betrayal, one that had nothing to do with Nathaniel, had stripped them of their fortune and status. What a tangled web, Nathaniel murmured to himself, leaning back in his chair. He couldn't shake the feeling that Clara's life was intertwined with his in ways that transcended their current circumstances. This revelation simmered in his mind, igniting a flicker of empathy he had long buried under layers of anger and resentment. Meanwhile, Clara was at home, grappling with her own storm of emotions. She couldn't shake the feeling that Nathaniel was up to something. She had seen the way he looked at her, like a puzzle he was determined to solve. It was a mixture of anger and sadness that coursed through her veins as she paced the small living room she shared with her brother. "Why would he care about my family?" Clara whispered to herself, her heart heavy with uncertainty. The thought of Nathaniel digging into her past made her skin crawl. She recalled the way he had betrayed her trust, using her vulnerability as a weapon. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a letter, its envelope adorned with an unfamiliar crest. Clara's heart raced as she tore it open, her hands trembling in anticipation. Inside was a message from a distant relative, someone she had only heard about in hushed family tales. "Dear Clara," it began, "I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to share something of great importance regarding our family lineage." As she read, Clara's world tilted on its axis. The letter detailed a long-buried secret about her heritage, revealing connections that made her breath hitch in her throat. The Thompsons were not just ordinary people. They had once been part of a prominent family with ties to Nathaniel's lineage, a fact that had been obscured by time and betrayal. "No, it can't be," she gasped, her hand covering her mouth in disbelief. The implications of the letter swirled around her like a tempest. Clara felt as though the ground beneath her was crumbling, the very foundations of her reality shaking. How was it possible that her family history intertwined with Nathaniel's? She rushed out of her small apartment, her heart pounding in her chest, desperate to confront him with this shocking revelation. The drive to Nathaniel's mansion was a blur, her mind racing with possibilities. Would he react with anger, or would he be intrigued by the hidden bond they shared? As she entered the grand foyer, Clara felt the weight of the house's opulence pressing down on her. The chandeliers sparkled above, casting ethereal light across the marble floors. She spotted Nathaniel in the study, his back to her, engrossed in his research. "Nathaniel!" she called out, her voice echoing through the vast space. He turned, surprise etched across his features. "Clara, what's wrong?" His brow furrowed as he approached her, concern quickly replacing his initial shock. "I found something," Something about my family, she exclaimed, the words tumbling from her lips in a rush. We're connected, it's all in this letter. She thrust the paper into his hands, her heart racing with a mix of fear and anticipation. Nathaniel scanned the letter, his expression shifting from confusion to incredulity. Connected? How? He paused, his brow furrowed as he processed the implications. This changes everything. Clara watched as the pieces fell into place for him. The anger that had fueled his desire for revenge began to flicker in his eyes, replaced by an unexpected vulnerability. I never knew, he murmured, more to himself than to her. Your family. They were part of my mother's life. The silence hung between them, a weighty acknowledgement of their intertwined fates. Clara could see the conflict warring within him, the man who had plotted against her family and the man who now stood before her, grappling with a truth that could alter their lives forever. Do you understand what this means? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. All this time I thought you were just trying to destroy my family, but now I see that we share a legacy. Nathaniel took a step closer, his gaze locked onto hers, searching for answers in the depths of her eyes. I was blinded by my anger. I wanted revenge, but I never considered the possibility that we were connected in this way. Maybe that's why we need to figure this out together, Clara suggested, her heart racing. We can't let the past dictate our future. We owe it to ourselves to find out what this means. Nathaniel nodded slowly, the weight of the revelation settling heavily on his shoulders. You're right. I've spent so much time focused on vengeance that I lost sight of what could truly matter. We need to learn about our families together. A tentative understanding began to blossom between them, the bitterness of their past slowly yielding to the uncertainty of a shared future. Clara felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a glimmer of possibility that perhaps they could rewrite their narrative, transforming pain into something resembling redemption. As they stood in the lavish study, surrounded by the remnants of wealth and power, they began to realize that their fates were no longer dictated by the betrayals of the past. Instead, they had the opportunity to forge a new path, one rooted in understanding, empathy, and perhaps even love. In that moment, Clara and Nathaniel took their first steps toward healing, united by a shared history that was both complex and profound. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they were no longer alone in their struggles. Together, they would face the demons of their past and strive for a future that promised hope and connection, no matter how uncertain it seemed. Clara stood in the opulent living room of Nathaniel's mansion, her heart racing as she clutched the letter tightly in her hands. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across the ornate walls, making the atmosphere feel both intimate and suffocating. She had spent the better part of the day contemplating the shocking revelation contained within the letter she had received from her distant relative. The words echoed in her mind, each sentence pulling at the threads of her reality, unraveling everything she thought she knew about her family and, by extension, her life. Taking a deep breath, Clara approached Nathaniel, who sat brooding in his leather chair, the weight of the world on his shoulders. His dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, and his jaw was clenched, revealing the tension that had been building since their wedding night. Nathaniel, she began, her voice wavering but resolute, we need to talk. He looked up, surprise flashing in his piercing blue eyes. Clara, No, please let me finish. She interrupted him, stepping closer and holding out the letter. This changes everything. Nathaniel's gaze shifted to the envelope, suspicion flickering across his features. What is it? With a steady hand, Clara unfolded the letter, her heart pounding as she read the words aloud. Dear Clara, you may not know me, but I am a distant relative, a descendant of the Thompson line. I have come across some family records that may interest you. It seems you are connected to the Caldwell family. As she continued reading, Nathaniel's expression morphed from curiosity to disbelief. What are you saying? He asked, his voice low and cautious. Clara swallowed hard, her heart racing as she delivered the final blow. I am a distant relative of your late mother. She was disowned due to family disputes, but our blood ties remain. She took a step back, her breath hitching as she watched the realization dawn on Nathaniel. His face paled, and he staggered slightly as if the ground beneath him had shifted. "No, that can't be possible," he whispered, running a hand through his hair, trying to grasp the implications of her words. "You're saying we're family?" "Not family in the way you've been envisioning it," Clara replied, her voice trembling. "But yes, our fates are intertwined. The very anger you've held toward my family is rooted in a dispute that has nothing to do with me." Nathaniel's mind raced as he processed the information. The years of resentment he had harbored, the plans for revenge that had driven him to marry Clara, all of it now seemed so small, so petty in light of this revelation. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his tone a mixture of frustration and confusion. "I didn't know until today," she pleaded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I thought I was just a maid, a pawn in your game. But now I see that we have a shared history, one that could change everything for us." He stood pacing the room like a caged animal. The walls of the mansion, once a fortress of his power, now felt like a prison. "This can't be real," he said, shaking his head. "After everything, I was so blinded by my hatred that I never considered the truth." Clara stepped forward, her voice softening. "Nathaniel, it doesn't have to be this way. We can start anew. We can find a way to heal the wounds of our families." He stopped abruptly and turned to face her, his eyes searching hers for something. Answers, clarity, hope. "But how? Everything I did was for revenge. The thought of marrying you was to right a wrong, to punish your family for their betrayal." "Then let go of that anger," Clara urged, her voice firm yet gentle. "You have the power to choose who you want to be. We can redefine our relationship, rewrite our story. But you must let go of the past." Nathaniel's breath hitched as he took in her words. The conflict within him raged, and he felt as though he were on the brink of a precipice, teetering dangerously close to the edge. "I don't know if I can," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara stepped closer, her heart aching for him. "You can. Just look at what we could have together. A future built on understanding, love, and acceptance, not revenge." He looked into her eyes, searching for the truth she offered. The anger he had clung to for so long felt hollow now, a shadow of what he had thought it meant to be strong. "What if I can't forgive them? What if I can't forgive myself?" He was vulnerable, his facade cracking under the weight of their shared truth. "You must forgive yourself first," she said, reaching out to touch his arm. The warmth of her hand sent a jolt through him, igniting a flicker of hope. "Let go of this need for revenge. It's only hurting you, and it's hurting us." In that moment, Nathaniel felt the walls he had built around his heart begin to crumble. The pain of the past was still there, but Clara's presence offered a glimmer of light. "I don't know how to let go," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. Clara stepped forward, her heart racing as she took his hands in hers. "Start here, with me. We can figure it out together. I want to understand you, Nathaniel. I want to help you heal." As he looked down at their joined hands, something shifted within him. The journey he had envisioned was no longer about revenge. It was about connection, about building something real. "I've hurt you, Clara," he said, his voice breaking. "I've treated you like nothing more than a pawn in my game." "I know," she replied softly, "but I believe in second chances. I believe in us." Nathaniel dropped to his knees before her, his heart racing with the weight of his emotions. "Please forgive me," he implored, his blue eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I've been so lost in my anger that I didn't see the truth. I never meant to hurt you." Clara knelt beside him, their foreheads almost touching. "I forgive you, Nathaniel," she whispered, the words flowing from her heart. "But we have to move forward together. We can't let the past dictate our future." In that moment of vulnerability, the air around them felt electric, charged with the potential of what could be. Nathaniel finally understood that love, in its truest form, could indeed conquer the darkness of the past. As they knelt together on the plush carpet of the grand living room, the world outside faded away, leaving only the two of them and the budding hope of a new beginning. The question of whether love could truly conquer the past hung in the air like a promise. And for the first time, Nathaniel felt the weight of his heart lift, replaced by the exhilarating possibility of love rekindled.